You don't sell tickets, you don't fly planes, you don't check bags or announce delays or decide which gate gets which flight. You just own the ground everything lands on. 114 million passengers walked through your airport last year. That's more than the entire population of Egypt moving through one building in 12 months, all of them paying you before they even realize it. The coffee shop near Gate C7 pays you rent. The parking garage pays you. The hotel across the arrivals road pays you. The fuel company that pumps jet fuel into every aircraft on your tarmac pays you a per-gallon concession fee. Even the airline that hates your new terminal expansion terms is still here, because where else would they go? You own the only major airport in the fastest-growing metro area in the country. That's not luck, that's the whole business. It started with a government tender nobody wanted. You were 34, a civil infrastructure consultant with a firm that specialized in public-private partnership structures, which is a technical way of saying you helped governments sell things they couldn't afford to run themselves. The airport was losing money for 11 consecutive years. The runways needed $340 million in repairs. The terminal was built in 1987 and looked like it. 3 previous bidders had walked away from the privatization process after doing the numbers. Your partners voted against pursuing it 8-2. You pursued it anyway. The concession was a 50-year operating lease. You paid the government $2.1 billion upfront, borrowed against projections that made your lenders visibly uncomfortable, and took control on a gray Monday morning in March. The outgoing director, a career civil servant named Harold, who had run the airport for 19 years and considered it a personal failure that it had come to this, handed you a ring of keys in the operations center without making eye contact. You shook his hand. He left without looking back. The keys weighed almost nothing. The thing they opened was enormous. Year 1 was a controlled emergency. The runway resurfacing alone ran $380 million, 40 over budget, because a soil survey done in 2019 missed a drainage issue that your engineers found in month 2, and Harold's team had apparently known about since 2021 and quietly filed under problems for the next administration. You fix it without going public, because going public means 6 months of headlines that scare airlines into rerouting before you've had a chance to prove what this place can become. You fire the catering contractor in month 4, not because the food is terrible, though the food is terrible, but because their contract, signed in 2014, gives them exclusivity across all food and beverage in Terminals A and B at a revenue share that made sense when passenger volumes were 60 million and makes no sense now that you're projecting 90. They sue. The lawsuit costs you 14 months and $22 million in legal fees. You win. You retender the contract to 4 operators, and your terminal food revenue increases 340% in the following 18 months. Sometimes the most important business decision you make is ending something that should have ended years ago. Here's what they don't tell you about owning an airport. You don't own a building. You own a city that happens to have runways. Your airport has its own power grid, its own water treatment system, its own police force, its own fire department, its own hospital-grade medical facility, its own postal service, its own transit network, its own hotel, its own interfaith chapel, its own prison-grade detention facility for immigration cases, and a rainwater harvesting system that supplies 18% of your operational water needs. You have employees who have worked here for so long they have their own language for the place, shortcuts and nicknames, and a social ecosystem so dense that 3 marriages happened between staff members last year, and you know this because your head of HR mentions it in the quarterly culture report with what seems like genuine pride. Your head of operations is a woman named Celestine, former military logistics, 2 tours managing forward operating bases in environments where a supply chain failure meant people died. She runs your airport the same way she ran those bases, with a calmness that people mistake for coldness until something goes wrong and they watch her work and understand that the calmness is the entire point. On the morning of November 14th, a water main ruptures beneath Concourse D at 4:47 a.m. The concourse is closed, rerouted, and partially reopened by 8:20 a.m. 11 flights are delayed, 2 are canceled. One airline's operations director calls you personally to complain. You listen for 4 minutes. You tell him Celestine handled it faster than any municipal infrastructure team would have. He says that's not the point. You don't tell him what the point is because you know the point is that he needed someone to call and you were the name on the deed. The airlines are your tenants and your adversaries simultaneously. Every lease negotiation is a test of leverage in both directions. They need your gates, you need their routes. A major carrier pulling its hub from your airport doesn't just cost you landing fees, it costs you the passengers who feed every retail outlet, every parking space, every hotel room within a 5-mile radius. The ecosystem is integrated in ways that make every contract more than a contract. It's a relationship with 9-figure consequences on both sides of the table. You lose a hub negotiation in year 6. A carrier moves 31 routes to a competing airport 200 miles south that offered them a 20-year rate lock you weren't willing to match. The decision costs you an estimated $180 million in annual ecosystem revenue. Your board has questions. Your lenders have questions. The questions all have the same shape, which is whether you made the right call. You believe you did. A 20-year rate lock on those terms would have been a ceiling on your entire commercial strategy for 2 decades. You are not always sure you're right. That's the part that follows you home. Your airport handles 43 different airlines across 112 destinations. Every one of those relationships is alive, meaning it can get better or worse, meaning it requires management, meaning there is a team of 12 people whose entire job is to maintain the health of relationships with carriers who would leave tomorrow if a better deal appeared. You call this team the retention desk. They call themselves something less diplomatic that you've chosen not to formally acknowledge. The government never fully leaves. Your 50-year lease comes with a regulatory framework 1,200 pages long. Slot allocations, noise ordinances, environmental reporting requirements, security mandates from 3 different federal agencies, accessibility standards, consumer protection rules, fuel storage regulations, wildlife management obligations because birds and aircraft engines have a relationship that is ancient and catastrophic, and your ornithology team flies a falcon named Edgar twice a day to manage it. Edgar costs $180,000 a year, including his handler, his veterinary care, and the specialized GPS tracking equipment on his leg. Edgar has prevented an estimated $40 million in potential bird strike damage in 4 years. Edgar is the best ROI on your payroll. You have considered putting him on the company website. Legal advised against it. The politics arrive in year 7. A new transport minister decides your parking fees are a public interest issue. They're not, technically, because you're a private operator, but technically has never stopped a minister from calling a press conference. You spend 6 weeks in a quiet negotiation involving your government relations director, a former deputy minister named Paul who knows where every procedural body is buried, and 2 meetings in non-public locations that never appear in any calendar. The outcome is a voluntary pricing commitment that costs you $8 million a year and earns you 4 years of regulatory goodwill. Paul calls it a bargain. You call it Tuesday. Your daughter is 11. She has been to the airport 40 times and has never once taken a flight from it. She comes to see you sometimes after school, sits in your glass-walled office above the main terminal, and watches planes push back from gates with an attention you recognize from somewhere. She asks good questions, not tourist questions, operational questions. Why does that plane wait at the holding point for so long before it takes off? What happens to bags that never get claimed? Why does the fuel truck go to the plane instead of the plane going to the fuel truck? You answer every one, carefully, completely. These are the best 40 minutes of any week they happen in.
In year 9, you were approached by a sovereign wealth fund about a secondary stake sale. They want 30%. The valuation implied is $14 billion for the whole enterprise. You paid $2.1 billion for the lease. You sit with that number for 3 days before responding. Not because the math is hard, because the math is so clean it feels like a trap. You bring in 2 independent advisors. You bring in Paul. You sleep on it 9 times. You take the deal at 24% with a governance structure that preserves your operational control entirely.
The wire clears on a Friday morning. You are in Celestine's operations center watching the morning wave of arrivals when your phone buzzes with the confirmation. You read the number. You set the phone face down on the desk. A 737 touches down on runway 28L, and the sound of it reaches you through triple-glazed glass as a low, physical thump you feel in your chest more than hear. You think about Harold and the ring of keys and the look he didn't give you when he left. You wonder if he watches the news. You wonder if he knows what the place became. You don't reach out. Some things are better left as questions. At 114 million passengers a year, your airport processes roughly 312,000 people every single day. On average, a child is born in your terminal every 11 days. 3 people have died here of natural causes this year, in the way people die anywhere, which is to say unexpectedly, in public, surrounded by strangers who are somewhere else in their heads. 7 marriage proposals have been recorded on your security cameras this year, 4 at the arrivals gate, 2 at the departure lounge, 1 inexplicably in the queue for the budget carrier's check-in desk. Life happens here. It has been happening here for 50 years. It will keep happening here for another 43, on your lease, on your land, on your runways that you rebuilt from the ground up because nobody else would. You leave the operations center at 6:40 p.m. You take the staff elevator down, not the executive one, because the staff elevator stops at the ground floor closer to the car park, and you've timed it, and it's 4 minutes faster. Celestine taught you that in month 2. You still use it. Outside, it's cold. Your breath is visible. A wide-body aircraft is rotating off the far runway, gear retracting, climbing into the dark. You watch it until the nav lights are just moving stars. 114 million people this year. You never see most of them. They never know your name. The ground underneath everything is yours anyway. You get in your car and drive home.